Good morning. This is Faith in Our Hometown, brought to you as a community service and sponsored by Mercy Hospital, Joplin. And now, here is your host, Father Jay Friedel.
You know, one of the issues that impacts us as a society, and because it impacts us as a society, it also impacts all of our churches, is the issue of human sexuality. All of us are sexual, all of us have a sexuality, all of us function as people in the world, and what do we do with all the pieces of that? This morning at Faith in Our Hometown, we're going to be talking a little bit about that. We've had some things happen in the last few months with some of the denominations where they've gotten together to vote about things, and that affects people's lives in their denominations, and indeed for anybody who's in a faith church community. And so this morning, my guest is going to be Steve Urie, and he used to be one of our local pastors of a church that was open and affirming, which basically meant that it had a lot of gay and lesbian members, and they were very practiced at what they did. We're going to talk a little bit this morning about those perspectives and how that might impact some of the rest of us for people of faith. We're going to be right back here after this Mercy Minute.
It was silly to be so dreading it so much because it was really no big deal. There was no pain afterwards. I was really, really hungry, so I got to have whatever I wanted to have for lunch. But the rest of the day I just slept, and there was no pain, and went to work the next day. Every day that I opened up my refrigerator and saw that referral on my refrigerator, I just dreaded having to go through it. And now I just kind of laugh about it because it was no big deal. And knowing it's behind me, I just don't have to worry about it. Well, my husband and I, we do a lot of writing, and we kind of cram everything into the weekends, but eventually, we'd like to, once we retire, we want to be able to go on vacations on our bikes and go riding on weekends a lot more, so we have a lot to look forward to.
Well, again, thanks for coming back for another weekend, or maybe this is your first time watching Faith in Our Hometown, but we try to always make it interesting, and this morning is going to be one of those conversations. This might be one of those moments where everybody gets a little uncomfortable, in the room, but I hope you don't turn it off, because I really am just trying to help us all figure out how to live with each other, even though we might disagree on some things. And so my guest this morning again, Steve Urie. Steve is a former pastor here in the area, a regular churchgoer, one of our Christian churches, and he himself was a member of an open and affirming community, which meant that they had openly gay and lesbian folks in the community.
Yes.
And so, Steve, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then let's talk about that phenomena and how, because some of our viewers are going to be saying, well, how can they be Christian if? And I just want to hear from a different viewpoint this morning.
Well, my name is Steve Urie, and I was a member of Metropolitan Community Churches and pastored from 1985 until 2013.
Okay.
I think the important thing that we all need to remember is that we need to be kind. Mm-hmm. We need
Agreed.
to understand that in every situation, in every church, in every business, in every family, there's a good chance that you will have an LGBT person that is a member of the group.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I am a follower of Christ. I am a Christian, and I'm a gay male.
Okay.
And I believe, first of all, that God does not create junk, and that we are all important in God's eyes, and we're all God's children. And I believe that that's the way that we need to look at starting the conversation.
Yeah, and I agree, because I've always just said, and here's what I'm going to tell you about. Our Catholic theology, our Catholic teaching would back up exactly what you just said. That we shouldn't discriminate, that we should treat everybody with love and dignity, no matter who they are. We do that stuff, but we're not very good at practicing what we preach sometimes.
Right.
And I just got to say that from my own denominational standpoint, we're not very good at practicing what we preach, because we say everybody is human, everybody's a child of God, everybody deserves love and dignity and respect, but yet then sometimes we still turn around and we're unkind. because we don't understand, or we don't quite know what to do with a person, or all those things. Now, that's not the same thing as saying, "Oh, go do what you want," because that's where sometimes we'll differ.
Right.
But we got to start there. We got to start saying the first label that any of us of faith would say would be child of God.
Yes.
You know, you're a child of God. I'm a child of God. Now, how do we do that?
Well, I think first of all that the person has to be comfortable with themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And that typically it's a fear issue for the person that is a member of the community. But I think it's also a fear issue and a lack of education for people that are facing the situation that the person sitting in the pew next to them may actually be a member of the larger gay community. The church I grew up in was here in town, and I'm sitting in a pew, and one Sunday the deacons come up and tell the person in front of me that they know he's gay and he needs to leave. And as a teenager, I'm sitting there thinking, oh my God, what's next for me?
What does that mean for me?
What
Because
is
you
that-
were, you were
what's gonna
thinking at
happen
that
to
point in
me?
time that you were kind of in that same
Right.
category. Okay.
And yet, our church was very big on teaching God's love, that God did love everybody, and but we didn't always see that in action.
Yeah.
And here we are all these decades later, and we are still seeing some of the same issues no matter what group we're facing.
Yeah. And I think that you said something very important at the beginning, and that is that there are folks in all of our churches and in so many of our families that this issue impacts us. You know, who doesn't have a gay cousin? Who doesn't have members in our community that are sitting there that, now I teasingly say that we're not in the era of don't ask, don't tell. I usually say we're not in the rule of don't confess, don't absolve. All right,
Right.
but I think I probably, if I really tried to, look around, I'd say, well, they may be a couple, they may be, whatever, but I don't, but what does that mean? What is that? I really just, if they're Catholic, I just want them there.
Right.
If they're not there, how do they hear the gospel? How do they keep being who they're supposed to be as Christians?
Exactly.
How do they do that? How are they challenged by the word? How are they comforted by the word? And all of us have to be comforted and challenged by the word. So what does all that mean?
Right. And, oftentimes, scriptures can never be debated and anybody win. Okay? So I think it's very important that you don't just pick a scripture and say, well, this pertains to you and you can't belong here.
Yeah.
And we have seen a lot of that over the decades.
Sure. Well, Steve, how would you respond to this, though? Because, again, I really want you on here so that other folks can kind of say, okay, how does he do this, or how does he justify this or do those things? It's like, because we believe the scriptures are supposed to guide us.
Right.
And all Christians can agree on that, okay? And really, all people who use scriptures, so whether you're a Buddhist and you're looking at your scriptures, or a Muslim and looking at the Quran, or whether you're, everybody has to say, okay, our scriptures, those of us who have them, guide us.
Right.
Okay? So, but, and again, I agree that when you go to interpretation, you shouldn't use it just like a missile, okay,
Right.
and just beat somebody over the head with it. But how do we do that? Because there are going to be some people who are going to say, well, how can you justify being a Christian when it says this in this verse and this in this verse? So can you give us a quick, not again so that we're going to debate it,
Right.
okay? But can you give us at least an idea of how you feel like, that you can, still feel, that some of those things might, some of the lifestyle might be okay, even considering your, that reading of the scriptures? Because I think that people
Right.
struggle with that.
I think people struggle with it. I think that for me, my relationship with God has always come first.
Okay.
And I haven't had the issues that some others have
Okay.
had. I see some of the issues that I've experienced in the past as just hiccups that God takes care of. And sometimes people tell me my faith is too simple. But I think it's, again, number one, the importance of your acceptance of yourself. If you are part of the gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender communities. The biggest challenge we face today is that a number of members of our community, and we just had a Pride meeting and this came up, was the fact that a lot of our community is scared to go back to church. But when you talk and you sit and you have conversation, it's simply been a bad experience. And when you get them to talk about it, get them to tell their story, then they tend to become more comfortable with themselves, and then sometimes will seek to go back to their church or find a church that is affirming.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting in terms of doing that. I think I figured out a long time ago that the only way to figure out how to deal with somebody who's different than I am, regardless of what the difference is, whether it's male, female, whether it's, one denomination or another, whether it's gay, straight, whether it's, black, white, Asian, white, whatever the people who are different than I am. I think I figured out a long time ago that the only way I can ever bridge that gap is to wait in and have the conversation.
Right.
Because when I experience somebody different, I don't know what they went through. I don't know what their experience is. And for me to automatically assume that I do understand all that is a little bit haughty on my part.
Right. I think, too, that the comfort level within a group makes a big difference. Mm-hmm. And that, again, I go back even to recent events, talking with people that impacted, was it brought back old fears. And I talk to people every day that are trying to get back into a place of faith. And when you have something as large as some of the national news we've had, it puts that challenge back on that person on, do I dare step in the door? And so I think it's up to each congregation to be able to say, yes, we need to allow these people to come in and love them. And then start having a conversation within our own congregations and say, where do we stand with this? How do we talk about it? Like you said earlier, we can't talk about sex. How are we going to talk about sex we don't understand?
Yeah. My guest this morning is Steve Urie. Steve was a former Christian pastor here in the area. His church is since not open anymore, but still attends another Christian church here in the area. And we're talking a little bit this morning on, just a different, or a Christian viewpoint on, LGBT issues. And so we're going to be right back after this Mercy Minute. Actually, this is our small break. We're not going for a Mercy Minute. We're going for a short break. But we're going to be right back, and we're going to continue that conversation in just a moment.
You're watching Faith in Our Hometown on KSN TV, brought to you as a community service of Mercy Hospital, Joplin.
Steve, before the break, we were talking a little bit about, people wanting sometimes to be back in or to be able to have that conversation. I couldn't agree with you more. I think that's where the real welcome comes. Church isn't going to change its polity or its theology or its, official position on something. just because they have a member who might be, gay or lesbian or LGBTQ or whatever. Nobody's going to do that. But the whole point is that how do we still find a place for everybody? How do we still find a place where people can belong and be loved? I think that really becomes a lot of the key. I remember we did a show a while back, and I was talking with another area pastor who at that point in time said to me, he said, well, actually said to the audience, he said, anybody that wants to, if you're dealing with those issues and you're LGBTQ and you want a place to belong, come down to to our church and belong. And I'd love him. He's a great person, a friend, and all that stuff. And I just said, wait a minute, stop. I said, no. I said, I love you, and I hope your church, prospers in its own right. But I don't want any of my LGBTQ Catholics at your church.
Right.
If they want to be Catholic, I want them at our church. And, because I don't want them somewhere else. And I think most pastors would feel the same way now. That's not going to mean I'm going to say to that person, go do whatever you want and behave however you want. I don't tell anybody they should behave however they want, because we all get ourselves in trouble when we do that. But what I'm saying is that I still want everybody to know, and I try to tell our high school kids this, and our little kids, the love is supposed to be a little unconditional. Who you are is who you are, and okay, we'll have to deal with that. And what you do is you're gonna have to figure out what to do with that too. But at the same time, I wouldn't want everybody just going to, MCC or, Unity or any of those spots, because I want, if they're Catholic and they want to stay Catholic, I want them with us. And are we doing a decent job of talking with everybody? Are we doing a decent job of loving everybody? Are we doing a decent enough job to make sure that nobody feels like they're run away from their own family, if you will?
Right. One of the things, I don't believe in proselytizing. I don't believe in taking my church and saying, okay, it's the only church in town that will do this. So I want the gay community, Catholics come to my church and Methodists come to my church. I want them to be comfortable going to the church that they want to go to and that they can find a home in. And I will say that our church just recently had a summit where we had a whole day of gathering congregation and talking through some of these issues. Mm-hmm. And it was a great learning experience, and I would encourage any church to do that by just starting within its own group, having the conversation of the unconditional love. And that it doesn't necessarily mean you change your polity or how you teach or what you're telling people, but that you are showing that you've got the love for everybody. And I think the word whosoever is an important word in the Bible. And it means that, to me, we're to love everyone. And if we start doing that more, and telling our stories, and having our conversations, then we can make a difference in the world by starting to make a difference within our own local congregations.
Yeah, I once had a faculty member when I was over in Cape Girardeau at Southeast Missouri State University, and she came in one day, and I knew she was Catholic in name, but I knew she was struggling with going to church. And she came into my office one day and she said, "Father Jay, I have got to tell you," she said, "I have tried to be something other than Catholic. I have tried. I've tried to be ELCA Lutheran, I've tried to be Episcopal, I've tried to be MCC, I've tried all kinds of things." And she said, "I am Catholic through and through." Mm-hmm. And she said, "I just need to know whether there's a place for me here." And I just had to look at her and say, I think there's a place for you. I may not be able to tell you, go do what you want, but there's a place for you here. Right. And I don't want you to be anywhere else. I really don't. And I'll just never forget that day when she said, "Is there a place for me here?" And I'm just like, there should be. Because I think my instructions are, I should make a place for everybody at the table if they want to be there, if we can figure it out. If we can figure out some way of making that happen, So yeah, interesting. Yeah. So Steve, I mean, what's been your experience as a gay man and a gay Christian? What's been your experience here in the Joplin area? How do people receive you when you start talking about these things?
I think it's been a situation that it is a wide range of responses. For me, there's been everything from name calling to death threats to, are you really that simple-minded? To, how can you love everybody, even those of us that are calling you all these things?
Yeah.
And I have to go back to my basic faith and my belief in God, and show those people that I love them. The ones that call you names, you love them.
Yeah, that radical Christianity, it gets you every time, doesn't it?
It will.
It does, because it convicts you, and it says, I got to do that. Jesus said, love, your enemies, pray for those who persecute you.
Right.
So when in the face of the persecution, you're still trying to love, which, to me says, again, maybe if I don't agree with you on certain things, I got to look at you and say, you're trying pretty hard to be a good Christian.
Right.
You're trying to respond to the love of Christ and his teachings some way, somehow.
Well, even in my own church, we have a few people that are not totally comfortable.
Right.
And I had one of them recently that just walked up and said, I may not be comfortable with your relationship and it being here, but your kindness makes all the difference in the world, and I have to respect and love that. And I think a lot of it has to do with the way you conduct yourself within the group. And then when people really get to know you, then the sexuality part becomes a non-issue. When they see that you're there for the right reason, when they see that you're there dedicated to what you're doing, when you're setting or trying to set the example that Christ set, then I think that touches people. And they have trouble then making an issue with it.
Yeah.
And I think that's so important.
Let me get your take on this again, so that it's just so that we can talk about some of this stuff. So in my own denomination, what we've said is that some people, through no fault of their own, wind up having this, attraction. Okay. And, again, nobody's figured out where it comes from, whether it's nature, whether it's nurture. Nobody's come up with anything. So, again, our anthropology basically just says, you're a child of God first.
Right.
And everything else comes after that. Okay? And nobody knows where it comes from. But we know we got folks among us who are like you. Okay? We just know that they're there. So what we would say is that there's no, there's nothing wrong with a being, but yet we would not feel like that the church would be open to any kind of a genital expression, because we would believe that would be inappropriate outside of the context of marriage. And for us, marriage is going to be between a man and a woman.
Right.
And we got tons of other laws that cover that whole marriage stuff too. Okay, so we're not, you've been married once, if you had a marriage covenant, or you're not free to marry again, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we got all kinds of rules and regulations about marriage. But for us, it'd be man and woman, and just the two of them, and that's it. Okay, so we just say that the sexual relationship or the genital relationship outside of that would be a problem. Now, technically, I guess we wouldn't have any problem with friendships. We wouldn't have any problem with any of the intimacy shared on any of those other levels, but certainly that. Okay.
Right.
So we got about 2 minutes. Give me your best shot on this.
The genital part itself is not the important issue. The important issue is love. Whether it's between those two people, or whether it's between a man and a woman, or a man and a man, or a woman and a woman. And the respect of the love is what is important. I don't believe that we can reconcile necessarily the genital aspect of that.
Yeah.
Okay?
I mean, yeah. I mean, we might agree to disagree.
We would have to
Sure.
probably agree to disagree,
Yeah.
and in many denominations, it sometimes even goes more negative than that.
Mm-hmm.
But at least agree to disagree and respect and love one another. My partner and I have been very fortunate that we have found a church that when we ask about joining, if you want to join, join.
Yeah.
You know? And it's been a very comfortable situation. But we also have gone to churches where we were denied communion. Mm-hmm. So, and it was based on, using your term, the genital relationship. Well, you're living in sin, how can you come to God's table? Mm-hmm. I can come to God's table because He's asked me to. Because I've accepted God and my relationship with Him.
So my guest this morning, Steve Urie, who is a gay Christian man who is trying to share with all of us who might not necessarily believe all those things, the same thing. We're going to be right back after this Mercy Minute, so don't go away. We'll be back to wrap up.
I've had mammograms on the bus probably 12 to 15 times. It has been a lifesaver for me.
The quality of the reading is exactly the same. I will go back home tonight, download these images into the same computer system that the other images that they've been taking at the clinic today, and they'll all be read.
The earlier the better. Don't wait, don't put it off. Get started and do it every year.
Well, again, thanks for joining us for another Sunday on Faith in Our Hometown. My guest this morning, Steve Urie, a gay Christian man trying to just open up the conversation about how we can contend with one another. Steve and I are not going to agree about everything. My theology and my church won't necessarily let me meet him all the way, but I can meet him part of the way because he's another brother in Christ and another good human being who lives here in this town who's trying to do right the way he sees fit. We may disagree on the way that works, but how can we continue to be good to one another? How can we continue to be kind, to use his starting point? This is Faith in Our Hometown. I hope you have a blessed Sunday. Let's be good to each other and kind.
Thanks for watching. Faith in Our Hometown can be seen Sunday mornings at 6:30 and 9 a.m. on KSN. Brought to you as a community service and sponsored by Mercy Hospital, Joplin.